Okay. And so we're just going to make a clap.
Okay.
That's how I know where the sound starts.
Okay, got it. Got it.
So it's just like... So today on our podcast, we have the one and only Jessica Blanchard of Balance Yoga Wellness.
Hi.
And we've taken our seat in the meditation studio, as it were. And I think most of our viewers know who you are. But I think I would like to say that I've always admired the work that you do. And I think that you bring a healthy dose of integrity and sanity as a yoga studio owner. And I know in your past you started studying nutrition and became a registered dietitian in order to further legitimize some of the Eastern science of Ayurveda for your clients. And now you've decided to undertake medical school.
Yep.
And I think that's interesting. Doctors like Dr. Judith Orloff, very similarly, and Deepak Chopra organize themselves in the medical field and under Western medicine in order to help bring these practices to their patients. So I'm excited that that's something that New Orleans very soon will be able to offer. Right? I think it's cutting edge.
Not very soon, though.
Yeah. Well, I guess... the first question is the motivation behind making the big decision to undertake this years-long process.
Yeah, so it's interesting because there was kind of a light bulb moment, but I think there were a lot of things leading up to that light bulb moment, such as becoming interested in health and wellness, which started with yoga, which then moved to Ayurveda and then diet, and then I became a dietitian. And I just constantly hear from my clients that their doctor doesn't listen to them, doesn't put everything together, or it just doesn't work. So I kind of, even as a dietitian, it gave me quite a bit more that I could do with my clients, but I really think doctors are kind of the head where I need to be in order to really do the work I want to do. So it was kind of a conversation with my husband where I said if I was younger, I would go back and become a doctor. And he said, but you're not too old. And I had said in the past, like, I think medicine is so fascinating and I would love it. Through like doctors I know or who have been yoga students, and that's when then we started looking at it and thought, well, why not? And so I made the decision to just go ahead and get started with classes at UNO because I basically had to do everything, all of the prerequisites. I thought some of my classes to become a dietitian would count, but they didn't really. So I did everything from basic biology, chemistry, all through organic and biochem, and then took the MCAT and got into med school. So it was, and it's a long process, but it's a rewarding process at the same time. And life is a process, so I feel like I'm going to be older, but regardless, time passes.
Yeah, I think you're a non-traditional student, but you're also kind of a non-traditional person in that you bring a lot of integrity to all the things you do. So you have 2 kids, you're married, you run a business, and now you're undertaking medical school kind of from the bottom up, right? And you have a dedicated yoga practice. So like the question Oprah would ask you is like, how do you find time? How do you strike the balance, as it were? How do you stay on the beam?
I don't watch TV. That's one thing. I haven't watched TV in years. So don't ask me about any Netflix series or something. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And, so what I started to do was cut the fat out of my schedule. So things that don't really add much value. And so I guess my priorities are my children and my husband and family. And the studio in medical school, I think I have a lot of awesome people at the studio, like you and like Shayna and the teachers. So the studio, and I've worked on this over the years to set it up so there's not a lot of day-to-day work I do, but I do help with some things, as you know. And I just want to be here more. And then I can't study as much as everyone else does. I realize that. And so it's been, because a lot of the med students study from like 8 a.m. or earlier until 10 p.m. at night, and they take short breaks for lunch and dinner. But I can't do that to my children. That it's not their fault I'm going to med school, right? I brought them into this world, so I take full responsibility to be their mom, and I'm not going to cut corners on that. So I just do my best during the day to be very efficient with my time. I don't look at social media. I don't do much emailing during certain hours. I wake up early, and I fit in time for yoga or some sort of exercise because it also makes my brain work better. And I think I've done a lot of things to like try to get my brain to function as well as I can. So yes. And I've also accepted that I'm not going to make like the top grades in my class, but that's okay. My children are more important than an A in anatomy or whatever. Who knows? I could. I'm not going to say I won't, but I'm not going to sacrifice time with my children to study more. So I think this is the biggest test of how to prioritize. So really, like, these are more important. And I'm also not doing a lot of extracurricular stuff at school and et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, I think medical school has been described to me in the past as like being in a pressure cooker, or we say like drinking water from a fire hose. I think that metaphor comes through, and you're working within the context of like knowing that you have to kind of squeeze through this portion of it, and sort of keep everything in alignment, right? Which is a very yoga perspective, and maybe the yoga has given a backbone to what that looks like.
I think it has. Sure.
When are we gonna be able to say, Dr. Blanchard, we'll see you now?
Well, in less than 4 years, I'll graduate now, right? So I started just a couple months ago, but I'll finish in May of 2024. So that's when I will become an MD and then enter a residency. So I won't be able to have my own practice at that point, but I will be practicing somewhere, hopefully in one of the hospitals here in the city. I don't plan to move anywhere. So that's 4 years, and it'll be another 3 years after that until I can have my own practice. So it's a long journey, but I think it's a process, and that's another reason why it's important not to become overly stressed about it, because it is for the long term. And then, one of the anatomy teachers said it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Yeah. So pace yourself, which I think is very good advice.
Yeah.
I
think something that is an incredible asset is sort of legitimizing and merging the concepts of Western medicine with a lot of the Eastern philosophy that we learn in yoga, that doesn't necessarily have any regulation, even though we know from experience it has a ton of merit. So I think that sort of marriage for what that means for a yoga studio that eventually will be overseen by a doctor, I think that the business model for something like Balanced Yoga Wellness can really stand the test of time. Do you have a specific vision for the future of what balance might look like?
Well, I do know that when I become a doctor, my goal is to eventually have my own practice. I don't know exactly when that'll happen, but I do know that the reason I'm doing this is so that I can bring in nutrition, bring in yoga and stress management, and also things like sleep hygiene, which is really important. And there are a lot of things that are so important to our health and to all of the chronic diseases that are now a huge burden for our country that we could do so much with preventative, with like simple programs. I did this little program on Balanced Healthy Path where it's like several video lessons, and it walks you through what you need to do in each area. because these are the real pillars of our health. So it's diet, stress management, exercise, and sleep, of course. And this is the sort of model I would like to use when I'm a doctor, is that we help people with all of these things. So we include yoga, we include some advice on how to improve diet, and more than just advice and then you go away, but accountability. And I don't know like the exact details of how it's going to work, but we could easily set it up so people come to specific yoga classes that might be for people with certain conditions like diabetes or this or that, or heart conditions. And then we have a nutritionist on staff that helps people also just to figure out the vision of what they want for their health, and then look at what we need to do to implement that. So I'd love to have a practice that's holistic, where we have a team of people. It might also be physical therapists, and we figure out how to help them get where they need to be, because I don't like the idea of just like seeing someone and then saying like, all right, bye, go away, see you in 6 months or whatever. I don't think that is a good model for long-term change. And that's really what, to me, is a big problem we have right now, is the way the medical system doesn't help people to change for the long term, to improve their health, to get rid of these conditions.
Yeah, I think Krishnamacharya taught in this way, that it wasn't necessarily about prescribing a practice to a student necessarily so much as like seeing the student that's in front of you and sort of meeting them where they are with what they need. And I think that's where we get such a vastly different approach to the practice between both Iyengar and the practices from Pattabhi Jois. I think it's fascinating how all of that is sort of coming to a head. And you mentioned the 4 corners of health, these cornerstones. And that's something I talk about in the Wheel of the Year workshop as well. It's like the elements actually sort of signify these larger things. And when we kind of ring each bell, we find more balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for anybody who might be trying to undertake, a big feat, or any specifically medical school, or maybe feeling like they might be ready for a major shift and they need to take that leap?
Just start. Really. Just take the first step and don't worry so much about, yes, you have to worry about the end goal, but just start. Because what I find is people don't start things and they delay starting, and then 2 years have passed. Whereas if you start, even if it's taking one class or like looking into something and seeing what you need to do to apply to a school, just to get started, because why not? Because life is actually short, so we need to do things. And the other thing is to forgive yourself and be compassionate with yourself. And remember, often we learn more from things we struggle with. So it's not always easy, which I'm learning. It's not. Med school is like drinking from a fire hose, and it is very hard. But I'm also learning like, hey, I can not be the top. I can be in the average and be perfectly fine and happy. And I'm also finding when I don't worry about my grades so much, but I just think about learning, it's really awesome and fun and not stressful. So I think to be compassionate with yourself, forgiving, and also just kind of get started. Yeah.
Well, the last thing that I think I just want a seal of approval from the from our fearless leader. But I think I'm going to sit and talk with a lot of our staff and a lot of people who are influential in the yoga community, in particularly for the newsletter. And so originally I thought we'll just call the podcast something really simple, like Yoga Talk. And then I thought maybe if it isn't too cheesy, Jessica would let us call it the Balance Beam.
I love that. That's awesome.
So I think maybe now we'll move forward with
it's
some
perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking some time.
Thank you, AJ.
Sit down. Go on.